Good morning, everyone, and thanks a lot, Emma, for your kind introduction. It's really a great honor for me to open the second day of the Foundational Economy Conference with this keynote on care. The title of my keynote, you can see it on the slide, is Caring Societies, Feminist Lessons for the Foundational Economy. So in the next 25 to 30 minutes, the guiding question for my talk is: how do caring societies and a foundational economy resemble each other? And what can foundational economy scholarship maybe learn from feminist perspectives on care? So I will start by outlining briefly what I mean when I talk about caring societies, talk about some common denominators between caring societies and the foundational economy, and finally talk about some proposition or maybe give us some food for thought for the rest of the conference of what foundational economy scholarship could learn from feminist research on care. So when I ask what are caring societies, that's obviously a very broad question. And I would like to start very basic by reminding us of what care is. And I think it's useful here to distinguish narrow from broader definitions of care. So the more narrow definitions of care, which are the definitions of care as care work, what we usually talk about in feminist economics when we talk about care, is that care work is work that entails an interpersonal caring relationship, mostly defined as a caring activity provided by a caregiver to a care receiver. So we typically talk about, for example, care for the elderly, we talk about childcare, and what is the caring content, so to say, of this care work are some very specific characteristics of this work that distinguish care work from other kinds of work. So the characteristics are limited autonomy. The care receiver, if we now think about the child, cannot provide for itself. It also has to do with vulnerability because there are asymmetrical power relations between those persons that gives care and the person who receives care. It has to do with emotionality, and more than anything, it has to do with dependency. So the person who needs to receive care depends on this care given to the person. So in her 1993 book, Moral Boundaries, feminist philosopher Joan Tronto distinguished 4 phases of care. So the first one is caring about, which is about noticing a care need. The second one is taking care of, which means assuming responsibility for the care needs that one has noticed. And then the actual caregiving and the care receiving takes place. So those more narrow definitions, I think one thing that we should remind ourselves is that it doesn't say anything about yet whether the care work is paid or unpaid, or whether it is provided in the markets, the state, in a community or a household. So it can be anything. What defines it as care work are really so specific characteristics. Broader definitions of care go beyond, they venture beyond these narrow definitions. Say, for example, regard care as a cornerstone of a social ecological transformation. And such a broad definition has, for example, been given by the Care Collective, which defines care as an individual and common ability to provide the political, social, material, and emotional conditions that allows the vast majority of people and living creatures on this planet to thrive, along with the planet itself. So we see this definition is much broader, and it also shifts a focus. So when we now talk about caring societies, a caring economy, caring cities, so we know this, care is a bit of a buzzword these days, so everything is caring. What people usually think about more than dependency is interdependency. And in her 2013 book, in Caring Democracy, Tronto, interestingly, also adds a 5th phase to the 4 phases of care, a phase that she calls caring with. Caring with focuses on mutual aid, on reciprocity, and on solidarity, thus center staging interdependence. So keeping those two definitions, the more narrow and the broader ones in mind. What do I mean when I talk about caring societies? So thinking about caring societies always starts from the actual status quo and the care crisis. And I know no better books than actually the ones that Emma has written herself about the care crisis, which is a crisis of, on the one hand, in paid care work, where we face overwork, underpayment, precarious working conditions, but also in unpaid care work, where care work isn't basically seen as work at all. So starting from this care crisis and the interlinkages with all other forms of crisis, like the ecological crisis or crisis of democracy, what does a caring society actually look like? I think that caring societies, more than anything, have to acknowledge that the foundations of the wealth and well-being of the world rest upon the sphere of social reproduction and the labor of care, as we have written in the 2020 COVID statement of the Feminism and Degrowth Alliance. Caring societies follow those broader definitions of care that focus on interdependency and relationality. But, and this is really one of the main messages I want to carry across in this keynote, it cannot be a caring society if we do not embrace actual care dependencies. So it cannot all be about interdependencies and now we have a caring city if we're not acknowledging actual people depending on care and collectively take care of them. Caring societies are highly stratified and venture beyond communities also. So I think it's important. I do research also on caring commons, but I do acknowledge that caring societies have to venture beyond caring communities and really require a multi-level perspective, require to look at different actors that provide care. And also thinking, for example, about policies that create the spatio-temporal infrastructures for people to care. And I think lastly, it's important to say that the focus lies on the question of how to provide good care for all within planetary boundaries and without reproducing intersectional inequalities. And I think this last part is important because the intersectional inequalities part, because I really think that good care for all does not only mean good care on the receiving side, which is already far beyond what we have now, but it also needs us to ask who provides care and under what conditions. So recent data from the Chamber of Commerce here in Austria shows that 98% of the 24-hour nurses in Austria do not have Austrian citizenship. More than half of them, more than 50%, are from Romania, which makes the fact that Austria currently blocks the accession of Romania to the Schengen zone ever more cynical. So, leading over to the topic of this conference, foundational economy. How do caring societies and foundational economy relate to each other? I think there are many commonalities that we can draw upon. For example, the foundational economy perspective basically regards economics as a study of provisioning goods and services to fulfill societal needs. And this is something that has also been core to feminist economic thinking and the social provisioning approach in feminist economics. Moreover, the focus in foundational economy scholarship lies on collective consumption and infrastructure, as we have heard also yesterday. And this resembles the dependency in care research. And Andrew Sawyer, in a paper on the foundational economy, stresses that we must depend on others to provide for us, as we must in turn care for them. There are more common denominators, I would argue, between caring societies and the foundational economy scholarship. For example, foundational economy policy frameworks resemble or also ask about the paradoxical relationship between societal relevance and underpayment of foundational work, which is a phenomenon that in ecofeminist literature has been called housewifization. Also, both foundational economy scholarship and feminist economics and research on care talk about a shift to more localized, contextualized, embedded, and embodied forms of provisioning. So I think there are really a lot of synergies and common denominators. However, I still think that the foundational economy, from my understanding, has some gaps and still quite a bit to learn also from research on care, with the biggest blank spot arguably being its strong focus on the monetized economy. So Bertie Russell and colleagues summarize it as follows. Given the foundational economy's concern with those parts of the economy that support everyday life, there is an intersection with debates on the work of social reproduction. Yet, foundational economy literature currently has a blind spot when it comes to unwaged work, which remains overwhelmingly performed by women. Current framings of the providential foundational economy mostly limits their understanding to public services provided by the welfare state or para-state, and indeed to work that is predominantly waged. So I think there are definitely exceptions to this also, and I mean, one of the articles by some of the conference organizers is the 2021 articles for foundational economy as a cornerstone for a social ecological transformation, which really puts a large focus on this unpaid work also. And also this conference per se, so not only this keynote, but you established care really as a cross-cutting theme throughout the conference. So I really think that there is a lot of synergies that we can draw upon. And in the remaining 10 to maximum 15 minutes, I want to draw upon some things that I think could be food of thought for integrating care and feminist research more into the foundational economy framework. So the first thing I want to talk about is what foundational economy scholars refer to as the core economy. So as many of you will know, foundational economy scholarship distinguishes different zones. So on the one hand, the core economy, then the foundational economy, the overlooked economy, and the tradable competitive economy, with the foundational economy being the core interest, also what gives the name to the school of thought. So this table from a paper, amongst others, by Julie, is much bigger in the paper. The paper is Foundational Economy and Foundational Politics. So I really just copy pasted the upper left corner here, so to say. But here we see the main distinction between the core economy and the foundational economy, where the core economy in its form of consumption is characterized as non-economic because we must love one another and die, and exemplified by parenting or voluntary action. And the foundational economy is regarded as daily essentials via infrastructures of networks and branches like the material or the providential foundational economy. So when we talk about the core economy, we see that the gendered nature of the core economy, or the acknowledgement that the core economy is foundational for production processes in other economic zones, is not really part of how the core economy is conceptualized here. So this is quite different from how feminist ecological economics would conceptualize the economy. And it's a bit embarrassing here because actually that's a framework that I did together with my colleague Birte Strunk in 2018, but we had a very ugly PowerPoint version of it. And now it's been reprinted in an Oxfam report, Radical Pathways Beyond GDP Growth. So I'm showing you the nicer version of the graphic. And what you see here can be thought of in terms of what Maria Mies would call the iceberg economy. So basically, when we talk about the economy, what we talk about is only the tip of the iceberg, the monetized economy, what is counted in GDP, what is seen as productive, what is basically the focus of our economic analysis. Then on the other hand, we have all the parts underwater, which here you can see it's a maintenance economy. Later, it's been called the non-monetized economy of social ecological provisioning, it consists of also care work, so unpaid care work, and also ecological processes that sustain and basically make possible any production process. So the basic idea behind this is to say that no production process at all would be possible in the monetized economy if it wasn't for this unpaid care work. So such a reading of unpaid work is quite different from the conceptualization of the core economy, because it really challenges a framing of the core economy as non-economic and emphasizes that non-monetized care work is an integral part of what we call the oikos. So against this background, my first proposition, and I would like to really discuss this with some of you who have been working more on the foundational economy, is that we should regard unpaid care work in the core economy, which socially reproduces human livelihood, as a cross-cutting rather than as a separate zone, which constitutes the foundation and the infrastructure of other economic zones. Because basically nothing could be produced in the monetized economy from 9 to 5 if it wasn't for the social reproduction happening from 5 to 9. This also links to the second proposition I want to make, which has to do with the question of what do we regard as infrastructures. And here I want to tell you an anecdote. So last year I was at the Urbanize Festival here, taking place here in Vienna, at a really nice event discussing cultural and social infrastructures as basically a glue that holds together neighborhoods. So the workshop was opened with a short documentary, and the short documentary was about so-called Häuser der Begegnung, or houses of encounter, which were multifunctional buildings built in social democratic Vienna from 1960 to 1980. The documentary took a refreshingly unconventional approach. Instead of portraying the convivial encounters taking place in the houses of encounter, the filmmakers Markus Rupprecht and Laurens Steixner zoomed in on what is commonly invisible. They portrayed the building technicians of 3 of the houses to guide us through the infrastructure, which is the structure that lies below and eventually enables coming together in those houses of encounter. But the people who sustained the space in this documentary, 3 of them, were portrayed as rather homogeneous. They were all men, seemingly, according to their dialect, all from Austria, being responsible for the pipes, the heating systems, and the technologies that uphold the system. Well, yes. This is not to deny that those men also uphold the space and eventually enable coming together in the houses of encounter, but only partly so, right? Because how about the cleaning person? Quite likely a migrant woman, without which none of these encounters could have happened. How about the people and structures that take care of the caring responsibilities of those people who want to attend the events in the houses of encounter and thus enables their participation in the first place? I think what this anecdote reveals is that it is very easy to fall prey to a technocratic understanding of what infrastructure is, for it to be all about pipes, cables, roads, and men. And I would like to give a second proposition, which has much to do with a paper that I really like by Sarah Marie Hall on social infrastructure as social reproduction, where Sarah Marie Hall says that from a feminist perspective, infrastructures not only concern physical infrastructures, neither they only concern social infrastructures defined as social spaces, such as community centers, parks, and libraries. Rather, when we talk about infrastructures from a feminist perspective, what we should talk about is social infrastructure as social reproduction, and thereby foreground questions of labor, gender, and care. My third and last proposition is about the question which debates we regard as foundational. So one example I want to talk about here is debates on provisioning systems that have also been informed foundational economy scholarship quite a bit. So Marilyn Power in 2004 has written a paper on social provisioning as a starting point for feminist economics, which was a key contribution to feminist economics. And her social provisioning approach serves as a starting point for also 50 chapters of the 2021 published Routledge Handbook of Feminist Economics. So within feminist economics, you won't find one person that hasn't worked with the social provisioning approach. The major distinction between debates on provisioning systems on the one hand and feminist debates on social provisioning on the other hand is that the latter takes an intersectional approach to paid and unpaid, as well as material and immaterial dimensions of social provisioning processes. But as my friend and colleague Christina Planck and I have shown in a recent contribution to the provisioning systems debate, there is barely any literature on provisioning system scholarship that draws upon those chronologically much older debates of social provisioning in feminist economics. Another example that holds more for the German-speaking world is the resemblance of foundational economy thinking and the thinking that the Netzwerkvorsorgendes Wirtschaften or network caring economy has pushed for more than 30 years now. The network's principles on care, solidarity, and the essentials of a good life, and the theory building around these principles is amongst the first contribution at the intersections of feminism and ecology in the German-speaking world. However, it is barely ever recognized as such. On Wednesday, and some of you might have participated, we have organized a webinar towards a caring economy, Netzwerkvorsorgendes Wirtschaften meets foundational economy, as an informal kickoff maybe to this conference, in which representatives from the Foundational Economy Collective and from the Network Caring Economy discussed commonalities and how an engagement with feminist research on care can strengthen foundational economy approaches. But again, those spaces are rare and should be fostered. So against this background, my last proposition would be that while some feminist buzzwords, and I would argue that care is one of those buzzwords, get increasing attention, feminist literature on these topics is often structurally excluded from those debates. So when we want to foreground care and caring societies, we really also need to acknowledge those early contributions, which should be revalued as foundational also for foundational economy thinking. So to conclude, as you have heard, I see really a lot of overlaps between foundational economy and feminist perspectives on care. And I think that foundational economy scholarship and feminist research on care, a caring economy and caring societies share a general outlook and normative vision of the good life and good care for all within planetary boundaries. I think the synergies are far from exhausted, and I will just repeat those three propositions I would hope that we could discuss more about. I think foundational economy scholarship could think about rethinking the concept of the core economy, and really that's an open question for me too. Is it a cross-cutting zone rather than a separate one? Like, it's something we should discuss. It's about reframing physical and social infrastructures from the vantage point of social reproduction that upholds and sustains them. And it's about critically engaging with and revaluing the also historical significance of feminist contributions that come together with this thinking. As I said, I'm really impressed with the centrality of care in this specific conference. And I think it's a great example of how foundational economy and feminist research on caring societies can come together. And I think we can just start from here. Thank you.